Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next to None. We wanted to bring some exciting news. We have a new rhythm to the podcast each month. You'll hear from two guest leaders sharing real stories, real challenges, and what they've learned along the way. And along with the solo episodes, we're going to tackle the leadership challenges you're facing right now. Our goal is simple: give you both perspective and practical insight so you can lead with clarity, strengthen your team, and build healthy accountability in your organization. Today, we are going to tackle this subject: why your communication isn't landing and what to do about it. You can say something clearly, directly, and with the right intent and still have it completely missed. I know I've been there. I've done that a million times. And that's one of the most frustrating parts about leadership. Because at some point you have to start asking yourself this question: did they not understand, or did they just not care? And here's the reality most leaders don't really talk about. We don't talk about the communication breakdowns are rarely about effort or intelligence. They're about how people are wired to receive information. In this episode, I'm going to break down communication using the lens of Everything Disc. I am a certified practitioner with Everything Disc, so you can stop repeating yourself, reduce friction on your team, and start communicating in a way that is actually lands. So today we're going to talk about style misalignment. And let me just give you kind of a brief overview of what DISC is and what those letters mean. So D is for dominance, I is for influence, S is for steadiness, and C is for conscientiousness. And there's kind of two key dimensions with DISC. There's one that's fast and very moderate, and then there's one that's task versus people. And in order to do this well, we can't label people, but we can understand how different people communicate and these different styles communicate. The leadership reality of this is that most people communicate only in their own preferences, and few really adapt to others. And I have been one of the very blessed and lucky persons to be able to go through the certification and understand these well. And I've really implemented them in all of my relationships with people. I teach a training with businesses that says I can teach you how to recognize someone's personality style for the most part within 5 minutes, because there's this little cues. There's the body language, there's the language that they use, there's how they interact with others. Those three things are really key in recognizing those things. So when you can't adapt to others' communication styles, there's three things that really come about. So first is miscommunication, obviously. The second is frustration. And then the third is false assumptions about attitude or competence. I'm sure you've all been there where you've had this conversation with someone and you walk away and you think that they totally understood what you're saying in the workplace, or, on your team. And then you follow back up and they didn't actually totally get what you said. And it can be very frustrating. Like, I felt like I communicated very clearly, but we're going to talk about how that looks and what we can do about that. So here's something to think about. You don't want to have poor communication habits, right? And unfortunately, again, you don't really realize that you're doing it. I guess the aha moment for me was I was leading a team of about 250 volunteers, and everybody just spoke very differently about different things, how they approach something or all this other stuff. And I had this person come to me and they were telling me these things, and I was just kind of like, okay, cool, thanks for sharing that with me. And I walked away. Well, the reality was is they were looking for me to do something, but they didn't communicate it that way because they tended to over explain what they were trying to tell me, which I kind of got lost in it. My disc profile is I'm an ID, so I'm like smack dab in the middle of the circular pie that you see on the screen. And and with that, like, I love people, but I like things to get done. I'm a driver. And so let's talk about the different styles and communication tips with those styles. So the first one we're going to do is the D style, which is direct and they're very results oriented. What they value is efficiency, results, and control. And this can be very frustrating for someone that's not a D. And they don't mean that to be rude. I believe there's healthy habits and tendencies in these personalities, and then there's unhealthy habits and tendencies in these personalities. So the D really focuses on efficiency, results, and control. And how they communicate effectively is you communicate effectively to them is be direct and to the point. Lead with the bottom line. Don't tell them how you got there. Just get to the bottom line of it. Focus on outcomes, not the process, and give options and not long explanations. Definitely avoid over explaining and being indecisive. Leadership insight for you on this is don't mistake brevity for harshness. And it's really hard to not do that. So just a quick little tip. So now let's look at the I style. They're people oriented and they're expressive. And what they value is connection, enthusiasm, and recognition. What I think is funny is as we're talking about this and as I'm saying this, there's probably someone that popped up into your head that goes, oh yeah, that's this person, or oh yeah, that's that person. And you'll continue to do that. And what I hope from this is that you can take away an actual practical insight is that as you learn these things, you're going to start recognize those people in the workplace. You're going to see that those types of, hey, oh wow, they really love people. They're very expressive, or man, they really just don't really want to chit chat. They just want to know what I need. And so just be thinking about that as we're talking about these. So with the I style, how to communicate effectively with them, be encouraging and be conversational. They love to sit and have a conversation with you. Another one is show interest in them as a person. I used to tell some of my staff that, like, hey, if you're going to walk up to a D on a Monday morning and say, hey, how was your weekend? Did you have fun? They are not going to want to talk about their weekend. They're probably just going to be say good. But vice versa, a D needs to walk up to an I person and say, hey, how was your weekend? And then sit and listen to them. As much as it may annoy you to do that, just sit and listen to them. Another one that they have is allow space for ideas and dialogue. I'm an outward processor. I'm an ID, and this was always a struggle for me. I worked for a executive that was a like all D, and that person did not want me to process with them. They didn't want me to share ideas. They just wanted to give me my marching orders and me get out of their office. It can be like that sometimes, and that can be how it feels. And that's why it's great for leaders to understand these things so that you can communicate effectively. And then the last one is tie communication to vision and energy. I had that boss that would come in and say, "Hey, we're going to do this and I want you to do this." And I'm like, "Okay, can you help me understand why we're doing that?" And they didn't want to explain it. They didn't want to tell me the why, but that was important to me because when I understood the why, I could actually produce better because I had an understanding of the vision of it. One thing to avoid with eyes is being overly rigid and transactional. I do believe that there are ways to communicate. You can communicate transactionally or you can communicate in a relationship. And for an I, the relational communication is really important. Whereas for a D personality, the transactional communication is really important. And here's your leadership insight for the I. If you ignore relationship, you will lose influence. And that is absolutely true. This individual that I worked for that was a very high D, I didn't respect them a lot because they did not care about the relational aspect to me. All right, let's look at the S style. They're steady, they're supportive, and what they value is stability, trust, and collaboration. I actually had an assistant that was an S, and it was very hard for me because I'm an ID. So there was times that I was acting more as a D and there was times where I was acting more as an I. Well, when I would have meetings, weekly meetings with this individual, I would sit there and I'd be like, okay, we're going to do this. And then they would say, okay. And they took it down. And then one day I asked in my I personality, I said, hey, is there anything that I'm doing that may not be helpful for you in doing the job that you need to do? And they said, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. And I said, okay, what can I do? And they shared that I was very tactical, but I didn't give enough details of what they needed in order to complete the things that I had asked them to do. And it was very insightful for me because it made me realize that I was really operating more out of the D part of my personality instead of the I. And so it really was a big shift for me. And it was actually very helpful. And it made a really great partnership for my assistant and I. So let's talk about how to communicate effectively with an S personality. Be calm and patient. Give them time to process. So I was really great at saying, hey, take a look at the stuff that we talked about. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here and we'll schedule a 15-minute or whatever it was that we needed to do. And that was really helpful for them. The other thing is it explained changes clearly. I believe that everybody, for the most part, needs vision. If you don't have the why behind the what, you really don't get the what. You need the why. And then the last one is show how decisions impact people. So the S personality is also people oriented and they want to know how things are going to impact. And they're going to ask some really great questions. If you're not an S, the S's ask really great questions as it pertains to people. And I think it's a great way to say, hey, how do you think this impact is going to be for the team or for this person or for these three people? Those are great questions to ask. So what do you need to avoid with the S personality? Abrupt change or pressure. That was really hard for me. But when I didn't operate out of that, it was actually, again, a really beautiful partnership. And the leadership for the S personality is science does not, or science. Silence does not mean agreement. So just because they're quiet does not mean that they agree with you. It may be that they're processing or they're trying to find a way to have a conversation with you about it. And then the last one is the C personality. They are analytical and detail oriented. What they value is accuracy, logic, and structure. How you can communicate more effectively with a C is be prepared and organized, provide data and rationale, allow time for questions, and be precise in your expectations. So a great example would be, if I had and I did have a C personality working alongside of me at one point in time, I became very frustrated because they needed to know all the things and I just wanted to move forward. But when I learned that I had to really step out of my own communication and tendencies and help provide rationale and give them the time to process and ask questions and being precise in what I'm expecting from them. It's really important. So the things to avoid with a C personality is vague instructions and emotional persuasion without facts. I would say that at that time I was a lot more emotional about why I was doing things. Well, this is why we're doing this. This is because it's about people. Well, okay, well, what about people? Like, what is it? What's the impact that's happening, and how does that pertain to me? And the leadership insight for the C personality is questions are not resistant, they're processing. And I love questions. So questions all day long, all day long. So the shift a lot of leaders have to make is this. I communicated it clearly. Two, did they receive it clearly? That's a big shift for a lot of leaders to be able to really step back and examine themselves on, did I communicate this clearly or did they receive it clearly? And most likely you didn't communicate it clearly because you probably didn't communicate in a way that they needed to hear it. So this is a huge turning point because communication is not about delivery, it's about alignment. And here's a quick framework that I like to use when making sure that someone understood what I said. First of all, you understand their style. Hopefully, even in this brief little episode that we're doing, you'll be able to catch on to some things with people that you work with or people that you lead. So identify their style. So if you have a D personality, you know you're going to have to be direct with them. So adjust your approach, just like I just said. If I'm working with a D or if I'm working with the C personality, I have to come to them and say, hey, this is what I need to do. I'll give you an example with my husband and I. My husband's a C personality. I'm an ID. And we were looking for a new car. And when our kids were little, my husband's 6'7", and our children now, as adults, are 6'5" and 6'3". Well, we had a little Kia Sorento, and I knew my husband would be like, well, we got to get a new car. But so I started dripping some things, and I said, hey, have you noticed the boys getting bigger in the back seat? And he's like, yeah, one of the boys' knees are in my back. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I just left it alone and just kind of let it linger. And then I started researching vehicles. Well, it ended up being a large SUV was going to be the best thing for us because of his height and the boys' heights as they grew. And so I did some research, and I gave him the research, and I was like, hey, I did some research on some vehicles, and it looks like an SUV might be the best way to go. And I gave it to him, and I left it alone. And I didn't bring it up for him again. About 3 weeks after that, he came to me and he's like, hey, let's go look for a new car. And so we did. The point of that is I communicated in the way he needed me to communicate. I gave him time to process. I gave him information. I gave him the why behind the what. And it wasn't a manipulation on my part. I helped him have to process through that. So those are kind of like adjusting your approach to someone else's personality style. And then the last thing on that framework is confirming understanding. I always like, can you tell me what you just heard me say? Or, something along those lines, just so it's kind of like active listening. So what I hear you saying is XYZ. Did I get that right? And that's a great way to follow up with that. So let's talk about a practical application for this. There's a three-step communication reset. When you're talking with someone and you don't feel like it's being effective, just pause and ask yourself, who am I talking to? And that's in terms of the tendencies and the personality style. And then the second thing is you want to assess, what do they need? Results, relationships, stability, or data? Because that will also help you recognize what personality style they are. And then the last one is adjust. Change your tone, your pace, and the level of detail. And if you can do the pause, assess, and adjust, it'll make a huge difference for you. So, something to ask yourself when you're having a struggle communicating with someone. Am I communicating in a way that makes sense to me or to them? And what you'll find is most likely this is a blind spot that you have in communication with people. And hopefully this was helpful to you to understand some of the different personality styles so that you can ask yourself in the moment, am I communicating in a way that makes sense to me, or am I communicating in a way that makes sense to them? Because you want to shift that communication to be more focused on how to communicate to them, not how you want to communicate to them. Well, I hope this was really helpful for you. And if you're interested in taking the full DISC assessment, you can reach out to me at info@nexttonunn.com. And I'd be happy to walk you through your results, and we can talk about what that costs. Thank you so much. And I hope you got something out of this today. The Boardroom is a private virtual group for women solopreneurs and small business owners who are ready to stop guessing and start growing, with real support from women who've been in your shoes. Every month, I bring you together for a fully facilitated experience, expert learning, honest strategies, and real conversations that can move you forward. Just a guided space where your challenges get real answers from women who get it. I'm Amy K. Nunn, founder and lead strategist of The Boardroom, and I built this because the right room changes everything. Spots are limited and applications are now open. Find your seat at the table.